Thank you for coming, everybody. It's really great to see so many people here, and that will become evident as we talk this evening. It's also absolutely nerve-wracking because it was more than we were expecting, so it's fantastic. Please come in, sir. So the purpose of tonight is to try and bring you up to speed on what's been happening since our last meeting. Just recap for those of you that were unable to make the last meeting, give you some more information about where we've got to, and the absolute key thing this evening is to establish support and volunteers. This process is hard, no doubt about that, time consuming, no doubt about that, but I hope incredibly beneficial for this community. So just to recap, I just want to run very quickly through where we are in terms of the asset of community value. So an asset of community value is a building or land that has the purpose of improving social well-being. So that's an ACV. So the pub is now an ACV. An ACV does some things. So it does increase planning restrictions on that property. So the planning department would see that a property has an ACV, and providing it is being utilised, they would really want to keep that property as a community asset and facility. That would also make it a little bit harder for anybody else to get a change of use on the building. It gives the community a right to bid if the property is put on the open market, and the White House, for those of you who don't know, is on the open market. Really important is it does give us time to pull together a bid. That clock is ticking. So we do have to move quickly if we're going to move. But there's also some things that it doesn't do, and it's really important that we dispel the myths on this. It doesn't give us the first right of refusal. It gives us an opportunity to pull together a bid. But the seller doesn't have to give us priority. They don't have to treat our bid any more favourably than the next. It just gives us time. It doesn't prevent the building being sold as a going concern during the 6-month period. The White House could be bought next week by somebody who intends to run the pub as a pub. Nor does it prevent that asset being sold as something other than a pub after the 6 months has expired. So we are in a period of time where we have to do a lot, and we have to do it quickly. So just to very quickly bring you up to speed in terms of the date and timeline of the ACV. So back in February, the ACV was proposed at a parish council meeting. 23rd of May, that was voted through unanimously with 1 abstention. And the formal ACV application was submitted by the parish council on our behalf on the 17th of June. First of all, I'd just like to thank the parish council for the work they've done so far. It's been incredibly useful. We then had confirmation back on the 3rd of September that the pub had been identified as an asset of community value. On the 13th of September, the pub was put on the market, and on the 4th of October, we triggered the 6-month moratorium. Just to clarify, the 6-month moratorium starts from the date that the pub was put on the market, not from the date that we triggered. Okay? So we are 4 weeks into our 6-month moratorium period. So there's some things that might happen next. We all live happily ever after. And this is a real option. Genuinely, somebody could buy the pub, create an amazing pub, the community loves it, and we all live happily ever after. That's a genuine option. We know that there has been some interest, there's been some viewings today. There is no bids on the table, that we do know. The pub could be bought by somebody who doesn't engage with the community, and we end up with a landlord that is not delivering what the community wants. And the pub needs the community, and tourist trade. It needs to combine those two. If that happens, the pub will not survive. Pub has to be profitable. If it doesn't engage the community, it can't be. And then we're back to square one. We're back to the point that we are today of having to trigger a moratorium because the pub is back on the market. The pub could be bought by somebody with the intention of development, and I'll tell you why I think this could be the case. This week I received an email from a guy called David Ingram, who's the Senior Estate Manager of Green King. In his email, he clearly states that the pub is not being sold as a going concern, and after the current tenancy ends in April next year, it is being sold as a property. In the sales particulars, which you can find on the Florets website, if you want to go and look, they have also indicated that they intend to put in something called an uplift clause. What an uplift clause does is it gives that seller an opportunity, usually about 25%, to benefit from any increase in that property. An increase in that property would be triggered by a change of use or development to domestic property. That's why I think that is a possibility. It is only one of the possibilities of the pub being bought, but it is a possibility. No bidders come forward. We can't raise enough interest. The pub isn't bought. What happens next? Green King could keep a temporary tenant in place and leave the asset on the market until such time as the pub gets a buyer. Could happen. Green King could decide, you know what, this pub is not profit making. We don't want to throw good money after bad, so we're going to close the pub, but leave it on the market. Green King took the decision to put that pub on the disposal list for a reason. They are a business that generates profit and has to respond to its shareholders. The other option is Green King takes the pub off the market because they haven't managed to find a buyer and just leaves it empty. In order to generate an outcome that says this community doesn't want the pub, it's not an asset of community value, therefore we need to sell it for something else. This is not scaremongering. We could live happily ever after, okay? And I'll go back to that. These are all genuine options. We don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what the outcome will be. It could be fine. But I, for one, don't want to take that risk. So we put in a bid, and it's unsuccessful. Not all is lost. What an unsuccessful bid does is shows planning departments and other potential buyers that want to run it as a pub that there is a desire to have a pub in this village. Not all is lost by putting in a bid that is unsuccessful. If we do get to that stage, then we could put in a successful bid. And that means we get a say in how the pub is run. That means we get an opportunity to talk to the person running the pub and say, these are the things that we would really like. We've put some boards around on the walls this evening, and we would ask you at the end of today to just make some notes about what you would like from your village pub, because we're going to need that in the next 5 days. We remove brewery ties. That is a real killer for pubs in the current day and age. So typically you are tied to a brewery from a beer sale point of view, which makes your beer more expensive. You either then put your prices up to your customers or you generate a lower profit. It also enables us to potentially give a lower rent, because we're not trying to generate a huge profit from the pub, we're trying to cover costs, and I'll come on to some other items later on. We're going to ask you later today to give us an indication as to what you might like to pledge. That's the purpose of tonight. It's great that so many of people are here, because we need two things. We need people and we need money. And both are just as important. And again, Mike will give you some more information about why that's the case later on. If I own a share in a pub, I'm going to go more often. I don't need that excuse, but I am going to go more often.
He doesn't need the excuse.
Just for those of you that weren't here before, one of the reasons I moved to this village in particular was because it had a pub. And that's one of the things I always said, is that I want to move into a village that's got a pub. I want to be able to walk down to that pub without ploughing, walk in and know that there's someone there who will buy me a pint and have a chat. And occasionally, and people will be testament to this, I reciprocate. Both buying a pub and having a chat. Buying a pint and having a chat.
Never seen you buy a pint.
Said sometimes. So the other thing that this does, and I'll come on to this again later on, is it protects the value of that property for future generations. And that bit is really neat, and we'll come on to that later on. There are a range of models of how you can operate a community pub. I've spent a fair bit of time visiting some, and as a committee we've spent a lot of time talking to people that are doing this. And there are three options. One is we become Green King essentially, and we lease the pub out to a tenant on a lease agreement, usually starting with 3 years, and we agreed a fee and a lease payment for that. The other option is that as the community we purchase the pub and we employ a manager. There are some risks associated with that. If the manager leaves, we have to fill the gap. If there are any employment rights issues, we're the HR department. If that manager is having an issue with staffing, we are the ones they will come to. And I, for one, don't know enough about running a pub to be able to manage somebody else to do it. So I think that's not the option for us. The other option is it is genuinely run by the community. This means volunteers, rosters, people in the kitchen, people behind the bar, and if there are no volunteers, the pub closes. I don't think that's the option. So, as it stands, we are going to come to the community with a formal business plan, hopefully on the back of tonight, and a share offer that is based around leasing that pub out to a tenant. Most of the pubs that I've spoken to are operating this model. It reduces the risk on the community benefit society because there is somebody else who's responsible for paying the lease on an annual basis. It does, however, give the tenant the greater benefit from profitability, but it takes away the risk, and I think this is not about profit for the village. It is about securing a great facility that benefits the community. So the Community Benefit Society would be formed, and that Community Benefit Society would own the property. That would be managed by a committee, and the shareholders would have voting rights. One of the key jobs of the Community Benefit Society is to establish what the community want, and then secure a tenant that is buying into that. And there are some great examples around Oxfordshire where the pub is thriving because the landlord is listening to what the community wants, but the community is equally allowing the landlord to run their pub as a profitable business and do all the things that they need to do to make it a profitable business. So we would still have some responsibilities. We would have to source and vet and find tenants. So that's the starting point. We would need to establish and set a fair rent, and there are some things that will occur in the next 7 days, hopefully, that will give us an idea of what that should be. And we remain responsible for the maintenance and the improvement of the building. So it's not a one-hit wonder, this. If we are going to do it, there is some ongoing responsibilities and there is some ongoing work that we need to do. The tenant will also have responsibilities. They will need to work within our guidelines. So I went out to the Abingdon Arms in Beckley, and one of the things that they wrote into their tenancy agreement is that every fourth Sunday in the evening the pub will not serve food and the space becomes available for the community to use as they wish. They run a jazz night. That's their thing. The pub is still getting the benefit of the beer sales, of any food that's bought prior to that time. So the pub is still benefiting, but the community gets access to space, and that's the one thing that this village really lacks, is a significant usable space. They would need to pay rent. and they would need to manage their profitability. Managing that profitability is really important to the Community Benefit Society, because if they don't, they can't afford to pay their rent. And most Community Benefit Societies write in a clause to the tenancy that a key number of the committee on a quarterly basis get access to the books. They then know in advance if there's going to be an issue. There are risks, okay? And I want to be very clear about this. There are risks. It's incredibly successful in what I've seen, but there are risks. The key one is we're unable to appoint a tenant. If we can't find someone to run the pub, we now have a pub that is closed, but hey, we're on the hook. Community pubs are being seen really favourably by tenants at the moment, for the reasons that I've talked about. They tend to be more profitable. They tend to be used more often by the community. They tend to have a lower rent. They are always free houses, which means they're not linked to a brewery. So there are reasons why a tenant would want to choose a community pub as opposed to another. We will have to have some cash flow, and if we have insufficient funds, we have an issue. If a tenant decides not to continue after their lease and there is a void period, we're back to where we started in not being able to source a decent tenant. So there are risks. And this is probably our biggest concern right now, is the property maintenance costs. So I'm going to hand you over to Mark, who's going to give you a little bit more of that detail.
So James got to talk all of that bit. He's left me to talk about money. Thanks, James.
You're welcome.
So the financials. It is on the market. It is out there on a estate agent's website who specialise in pubs called Florets. And that's what it's on the market for. I don't know if you've heard that before. $495. Pretty steep, you think? That's not the end of it, of course. We all know those people have bought houses. Stamp duty will go on top of that. We've gone for a pessimistic sort of slush fund of initial costs to get it up and running, to do some work on it, make it look like we want it to look. So that's what we start with. And that is the target. Now, in our last meeting, it was brought up that this is a large sum of money and it is going to be difficult. Yes, it is going to be difficult. So do we say it is too difficult and we don't bother, which is one option, or do we say it is difficult, let's give it a go? And that's why the committee are here now, to basically say, we think we should give it a go. As James has already said, even if we fail, if we can show a lot of support, it does stop that whole thing of the developer coming in and it being change of use. You can look on the internet, there's lots of examples of pubs which are sold as going concerns. 1 week later, it closes down, they leave it for 2 years and then start applying for change of usage. If that support has already been shown, we are one step ahead of that game. But of course, we want to own it as the community, at least I hope we do. That, we think, is the worst case scenario, the most pessimistic thing we can come up with. Of course, we will be negotiating that, the price down, and certainly the information we've got from other pubs is that that starting price is high and that it always comes down. But we have no guarantee about that. That is the price, so let's put that figure up there. But we are hoping that is definitely worst case scenario, and hopefully that is quite pessimistic. So how do we do it? Fundraising sources, which I'll go through. Community share issue, that's you people here and hopefully people who know and people in the village who are not here that we've had messages from saying they can't attend but they are backing us. So buying shares in the pub, in the bricks and mortar of the pub, and voting on how it's run. Some people might want to give donations, people or companies. They can give a donation, it becomes a B share, they have no voting right, the money goes in, they can't take it back out again. As an A share, there is a possibility to bring the money back out again for when you want. James will talk about that. External support. It's not just the community that are interested in our pub. Churchill's pub, the pub where Churchill learned to drink. In the books. And grants and loans, of course. There's quite a few of those around. So in a little bit of detail, external support. Blenheim Estate. We've met with Dom, the CEO, who some of you will know, and he has said to say it publicly that they are supporting us to buy the pub. Okay? Blenheim are behind us. For those of you who were in the AGM parish council meeting, when we voted on it becoming an HCV, the community asset, Dom spoke then, and he did say something which is very, very important. They will not be the white knight to come and buy the pub for us. And this goes for all the people I'm going to go through, and there's a very, very logical reason why that can't happen, which I'll get to in a minute. Randolph Churchill. I'm in touch with Randolph several times, and just a few quotes he said to me, which he's happy to put out there. Our family is very proud of our association with Blaydon and the love and care the community gives towards my great-grandfather's resting place. Later on, a few days later, he said, your plans very much have our family blessing. The Churchill family want us, the community, to save the pub where Churchill learned to drink. I personally think that is gold dust for us, and also quite important. So Randolph is he's a trustee in the Churchill Society. That's not the Churchill Foundation, which you may know of. The society you also may know of, but it's based, where else would it be based but the USA? So it's based out of Washington with units all through different states and also the UK as well, of course. So we're hoping to speak to them as well and say to them, this is Churchill's pub. Let's not let it become a block of flats. Carlsberg. So who can tell me why are Carlsberg linked to Churchill? Does anybody know?
Something to do with the Danish resistance.
Danish resistance, they, of course, that is the big thing. If you've ever gone the 4th of March, up there, they're laying the wreaths. What you may not know is for that ceremony, there is cases of Carlsberg special brew are brought into the village every year and have been for the last few decades, which Carlsberg haven't put forward. They are very proud of their association with Winston Churchill. Special brew now has a bit of a different reputation. I was on it for a while, I've had to give it up. But it has a taste of cognac, and it's made for Churchill. And it's the 70th anniversary next year. They are aware that they can't rebrand it, but they're doing all the labels, bottles, and they are trying to bring it into the mainstream as well as this reputation it has. Carlsberg are interested in supporting us. They are checking the legals to see if they can, and if they can, they are certainly very interested in adding their support, which will probably be financial. Big Society Capital, it's an organisation which does grants and loans into society projects, so they will be able to help us as well to gain money. And crowdfunding, I think we all know the crowdfunding idea. We put it out there. People love the idea of owning a little bit of a pub, community pub, and we have that extra thing that we are Churchill's pub on the doorstep of Blenheim Palace. The most important box is the next box. None of those people are going to get involved unless the community gets involved. And it is a two-pronged thing that James has already touched on. There is the numbers of people. We need to have a lot of the community and further afield who sign up to have that share. It shows the physical numbers that are involved. If you are going to have a share as a couple or a family, split it, put it in as two people. It really makes a difference. That means every single person who takes out a share, you are important because it adds to that back swelling that there is the community there. And it is directly linked. Of course, if everybody puts in the minimum amount, there won't be enough money in there for these people to think we are viable. So beyond the sheer numbers, the people who can afford more than the minimum, we do need that as well, otherwise it still will not happen. So if we get that, there is the chance, and there's no definite with any of these people, but certainly the indications are that they will do some sort of percentage of what we have put in. So in real terms, that means that if you put your money in, it is worth more than the money you've put in, because we may well have money on top of that. But that is the important thing. We cannot sit back. None of these people are going to do it. The reason why I spoke earlier, it was explained to me very clearly by Dom and from Blenheim Palace. If they come in, any of these people come in and are a majority shareholder of the pub, and the pub doesn't work as a community pub, it closes down. The planning department have already proved that we don't want it. It will go straight to redevelopment. We'll have that block of flats, and the person who is the majority shareholder, everybody will get their money back because the plot of land is worth a lot more, but that person holding the share will be seen as the person that built on Churchill's pub. And that's why none of these people will be a majority shareholder. There is no white knight coming over the horizon to buy it for us. So, grants and loans. The Plunkett Bursary. The Plunketts are based here in Woodstock. Some people may know about them, but they are there to help community schemes go forward. They have a bursary already touched on by James, £2,500 to get us going. We are a member of Plunketts now, and we are applying for that bursary, which just sort of starts us off. More Than a Pub. They are an operation that offer up to £100,000, which is split between grant and loan. A lot of hoops to jump through. You have to prove that it is more than a pub. So we need ideas of what you want in there as a community. And it is also based on how many people are interested. It's back to that, your one, even minimum amount makes a difference, because then we can get more funding from other people because of it. Commercial mortgage, of course, if we have a shortfall, like any business, we can have a commercial mortgage, which then is a monthly repayment, which then ups our costs, which we have to pass on to the tenant, so it makes the business model less attractive. If we can avoid a commercial mortgage, it makes sense to avoid it. District Council, there's an amazing number of grants out there. None of them are particularly huge, but a lot of them we can probably get our hands on. So we can apply for these, and again, a lot of them are linked into what it is doing for the community, how many of the community are involved. Again, it's those numbers of people signing up just to be recognised. National Lottery, we all know, do get involved with social and community events. The previous slide I've shown, some of the people, organisations on there may not gift us money, they might not do anything at all, but they may be willing to loan us money on a better value than the commercial mortgage, but it will still add to our monthly costs and still have an effect. You can probably guess what the next box coming is, the big one at the bottom. It's exactly the same. It all depends on the number of people who sign up, and it all depends on how much of a fund that we start with as a community. So with this, we are saying that target doesn't have to be achieved with all of our money. There are other potentially good incomes that we can get, or inputs we can get elsewhere, but none of it will come unless we can show that we are behind it. And unfortunately, it's the way of the world, isn't it? The more money you've got, the easier it is to get more money. And this certainly applies in this case. So that's all the negative bit. It can be done. This isn't some crazy idea James on his 6th visit to the 7th bar came up with. That idea he came up with is brilliant, I'll tell you about that later. So we're up to about 100 pubs in the UK that are community owned, community run. 100. There was something that was retweeted on our social media, I think yesterday, purely by chance. It is still a 100% success rate. No community pub has gone to the wall after being a community pub. There are problems running it. The problems are getting there. There are those who have got there and bought it. 100% have succeeded. Is it working locally? The answer is yes. Now, there's 6 places here. James has visited all of them. He invited me to one of them, but I'm not bitter.
It was the first one.
And I learned my lesson. So this isn't crazy thinking. This is just in our local community, what we've managed to achieve. So this is not pie in the sky, it is doable. James.
So the people that run these pubs, the community benefit societies that run these pubs, also meet as a group. there's some really great stuff that's come out of that. They now brew their own beer called Community Endeavour, which is brewed by the Little Ox Brewery in Hamborough, and it's sold in the community pubs. That's another community project that's being benefited by community pubs. It's a nice beer as well. So 7 Stars Marsh Bolden is by far the leading light in this pack. They are more profitable than all of them by far, but they've been at it for a while. The Abingdon Arms have been incredibly useful. We've spent a lot of time talking to them. They've shared with us their business plan and their share offer prospectus, and they've given us a lot of detail that really is informing us as to how we progress. So in terms of what happens next, some of these steps, or all of these steps, will not happen if we don't get enough community interest. The first one, if we do get enough community interest, is to formalise a committee and add skills. We don't just need your money, we need your time and your expertise. So things like legals, tax advice, accountancy, experience of acquisition, all those kinds of stuff. And I know there is a gentleman or a lady in the room who posted on our website offering some support. Yes, we would love that support. Hopefully you're in this evening. We would then need to fund the initial project. So as a committee, we have all contributed a small amount to get ourselves to this point. The next steps get more expensive pretty quickly. So we have applied for the £2,500 Plunkett bursary, and after a meeting with a Plunkett advisor last night, we're fairly confident that we will be successful in that application. Around the room, as I've said earlier, we have asked you to start giving us some ideas about what you want from a pub, and that's really important because towards the end of next week, we will then be sending out a survey linked to some of these things to find out more about what you want from a community pub. Those ideas and thoughts and desires go into a business plan. They go into our applications for grants. They go into our applications for loans. They say to some of the people that Mike has done an amazing job in talking to so far, that there is a real desire for this and you're backing a winning project. As it stands, we have provisionally booked a surveyor going to the White House next Friday from our bursary and via the Plunkett Foundation. That will give us some really great detail. And we can't give you all the answers tonight because we don't know. But that will give us some great detail about the standard of the property, what it might cost, what the potential lease value could be, and what the potential turnover could be based on other pubs that are successful. Those activities then enable us to come to the community with a proper business plan. We're some way there. We wouldn't share it with you this evening because we're not far enough down the line and we don't want to give you some incorrect information. And that would lead into a formal share offer prospectus. Now we would love to get this out in early November. That's an aspirational timeline. Whether it's achievable or not, we don't yet know, but we really would like to be in that position because the clock is ticking. So this is the big bit for us this evening. This kind of either progresses the project or it stops it dead. And that is an indication of interest. So what is it that you're indicating that you would like to be a part of? The way that the community share offer would work in its very basic form is a purchase of shares by the community members and people from outside the community. There's nothing to say that you have to live in the community to buy a share, and that's why we're really going to work with the Church and the Link to try and get external people to invest and buy shares. Now, the kind of normal method is £50 a share, but a minimum 5 share purchase. So £250 is the minimum investment, and then ramping up in £50 increments from there. Now, we are starting to explore, and no promises, but we really want everybody to be able to buy shares. So we are exploring some ways that we can change that. That might be, for example, that we allow people that live within 3 miles of the pub to buy a smaller number of shares. It might be that we can enable groups of people to come together to get to the 250. we've said it a couple of times tonight. Every single shareholder is as important as the next one. And every single shareholder plays a huge part in getting funding, in getting grants, and getting people to go to the pub, which really is what it's all about. Just in case anyone was wondering, the maximum investment is £100,000. You can all breathe a sigh of relief now. I know that was the big bit of information everybody was looking for. And that does just really echo some of the things that Mike has said about no single investor can be the white knight, because the maximum is 100,000. And as it stands, our target is 580,000. Said it already tonight, one member, one vote. If you are a shareholder, your vote is important as the next person, regardless of the number of shares that you own. We genuinely believe that this is a profit-making exercise, but that the Community Benefit Society would use some of that profit to improve the pub. We've had some really great conversations in the last week. So we met with the Plunkett Foundation. They're based in Woodstock. What they would absolutely love is to move into a community project. So we are at a very early stage in that regard, but there is an opportunity to maybe create a bit more space that would enable Plunkett to give us a rental payment. And what better place to be if you are an organisation that helps community pubs and shops? It would also potentially give us, for example, a meeting room that could be used by the community outside of office hours. There's a whole host of great opportunities here. I'm going to stress the word potential here because I do not want to give anybody false information about what the outcomes might be. We would love to think that we will be in a position to pay interest on those shares. There are some great examples. The Bell in Bath is paying 5%. In this day and age, that is mind-blowing. There are some pubs that are 2 years in that are not paying interest. There is a pub in the Oxfordshire group whose community shareholders have refused to take their profits and have said, no, let's invest it in this. One member, one vote, that's a community decision. You can withdraw your shares. Now, there are some barriers to this. Most share withdrawals have a minimum of 3 years before you can withdraw. And only then can they be withdrawn if the Community Benefit Society has enough money to allow those shares to be withdrawn. They cannot be sold. Shares of a Community Benefit Society cannot be traded. So if you are buying these shares, you're in. You're in for 3 years. If things are going well, you can get out. But you might not be able to get that money back quickly. They can be passed on through inheritance. And this is the really neat bit. So there is something called a statutory asset lock that is an essential part of a community benefit society. And what that means is that if at some stage in the future, the property is sold and there is a huge profit from that, first of all, you get your money back as shareholders, but that profit can't be given to the shareholders. That profit can only be used for community projects. Worst case scenario, we buy the pub, it goes belly up, we are then selling a property that clearly can't be run as a community facility because it was the community that was unable to make it work. So you would then start to think that a planning department would take a view that actually this isn't a community facility that's really viable. We would sell it as a development property, and then that benefit goes back to the community. And there's no doubt about it, that plot of land is worth infinitely more as a property development opportunity than it is as a pub. That could give us an opportunity to build a space to replace it, so a community hall, because we would have funds in the bank that has to be used as a community project. Your shareholding is secured against the bricks and mortar. So yes, there's a risk. We would consider it, as does the Plunkett Foundation and others that are running these types of projects, as a low risk. But there is that bit about the fact you might not get huge share payments, you might not be able to get your money out quickly, but it is protected. Think about it like this. You're joining a club for 5 years. £250 donation for shares is 96 pence a week. So the issue here is having that money up front, because we can't build this over time. We have to have the investment up front to purchase the pub. So what we'll ask you to do now is two things. There are some beer mats on the chairs, there are some pens around. One side is printed, the other side is blank. So we're going to ask you to write on that the amount of money that you think you could invest. Your name and your email address. Now, just to clarify, this is non-binding. It is in confidence, so this will not be publicised anywhere. The committee will have a view of it because we need to know how much we have, but it is in confidence. Okay? And the other thing I would say is, please do not write a number that you genuinely can't afford to put in, because the amount that we think we get out of tonight has a direct impact on what we do tomorrow. So make sure that what you are writing down is something that you can afford. Now, we've put up there that as it stands, it would be £50 a minimum 5 shares. If you cannot get there, your shareholding is just as important as the next person's. So if you can afford £20, put £20, because every single person who commits to buying a share, a non-binding commitment, is important. The number of people buying shares is just as important as the amount of money that is being raised. So I'll ask for any questions at this point.